Welcome to the CrÆtive Mind podcast. My name is Maike Döhling. I'm your host and I'm here to inspire you in unfolding your creativity and greatness. Today with my wonderful guest Anna Allgäuer about trauma awareness and embodiment. Enjoy the conversation. I'm very happy and grateful to have my dear friend Anna back in the podcast, and I'm saying back because you were the first or the second guest in my old podcast Actors and Mind 2 years ago. By the way, it's still one of the most downloaded episodes.
Wow.
So for the ones who haven't listened yet, it's still there. Now we are in the new podcast, the CrÆtive Mind, and you are again our second guest today, only with me. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much, Maike. I'm so happy to be here, and it's always such a pleasure to talk to you. It's so interesting. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and also I think the topic or today's topic is going to be a really interesting one.
Yes. Yeah. Last time we were talking about manifestation. You are, or at that time, a coach for positive psychology. Now you also added the embodiment topic.
Yes.
Tell us a bit what you're doing now.
Well, if we start 2 years ago where I was there, I was a coach already. I was working a lot with positive psychology and psychology in general. And when I was coaching, I always found that there's a piece missing because we were just entering everything with the mind, like understanding, thinking about things, which is amazing. And it's what psychology does normally and therapy does and so on. But I was always like missing the human body, like the whole being. And I'm like a person, you know me, you're smiling. I'm like, I have a lot of gestures, I move a lot, and I come from the theaters. I was always, there's a part missing. We cannot do the work without our body. So I investigated a lot. I trained a lot the last years. I became an embodiment teacher, and this opened a whole new perspective actually to all the topics I'm working with. I'm still working with positive psychology and so on, but it added a totally new layer to take in embodiment. And what it did, what I saw, it was really interesting. It was interesting. It shifted my work more and more towards leadership training. Meaning one part leadership in the sense that people really have a leadership position in a company, or I work with women, and a lot of those women are women in a position where they are among a lot of men, and they're the only woman in a leadership position, and they have men above them, beyond them, and it's very interesting, the dynamics and everything. This is one part. Like leadership in companies and what it means to be a woman in leadership. And the other part is self-leadership. And this is for everyone. Like this is for me, personal development. And embodiment for me is like it closes the cycle. It was the missing part where you really can do the whole loop and change things in your life, and not only thinking about them, but really doing the work. And this is what I do.
Oh, it's so interesting. Also the self-leadership. Maybe we come to that later.
Yeah.
Okay, so I asked you to talk about trauma and embodiment today. So I guess we are starting with the embodiment because that's so interesting. I also learned about embodiment in my education. But it was only one part, and I realized that embodiment is such a huge topic, and a lot of people don't really know what embodiment is. Because everyone says, I have to embody who I really am, but what does that mean? What is embodiment?
That is a very interesting question, and I think that's also a little bit the challenge about the whole topic, because there is not one explanation. It is not a word everyone uses in the same context. So what I learned every time I talk about embodiment or someone talks about embodiment, I ask the person, how do you describe embodiment? What does it mean for you? Because otherwise it can happen that you're talking about totally different things. For me, what embodiment means and what I learned in my training is the ability, if I break down to one sentence, is the ability to listen to the whole body and being able to work together with the whole body and not only with one part of it, which normally is the brain.
Okay, so that means if you, for example, have your realizations in the brain, but you still have the old patterns, for example, how do you connect these two? Is this embodiment to connect the body and the brain?
This is the embodiment work then, yes. Okay. Embodiment itself is, I think, or for me, it means working in sync, in synchronization with the whole body. And that's where it starts. You just said, if I have a realization, where would you think you have this realization?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Now you're asking me that, I think there are two ways. Sometimes in my head, but sometimes with the emotions. I feel it.
Good. That's where we go to. Let me explain you maybe a little bit.
Yes.
A concept. Please. I brought it with me. I brought a few beautiful paintings. I will show it to you and explain it to our listeners because I love it. This is, now we're talking science. This is not some woo-woo stuff. This is real science. Some of you might have heard it, others not, but we do not only have one brain in our body. We actually, the science at the moment knows that we have at least 3 brains in our body. Maybe just very quickly to say a few sentences about what is a brain. A brain has its own nervous system, it has neurons, it takes in information, it works through information, it saves data, and it also puts the data to different storage places and sends it to other places in the body, which then provokes chemical reactions, for example, or things we do, and so on and so on. And every one of those 3 brains has all of this and is a system on its own. And then ultimately they work together. And what are the 3 brains? One is very well known for every one of us. It's the brain, the head, which is the first brain, but it's not the only brain. The second brain, which has all of the same things. It has neurons, it thinks, it saves data and emotions and memory, is the heart.
Wow.
Imagine that. I mean, when I heard that the first time, I was like, are you kidding me? And the third one, which also does exactly the same thing, is the gut. So the stomach, the gut. So we have the brain, we have the heart, and we have the gut. And actually all 3 of those, what science knows, are brains working on their own, and then they work together. And this is where the whole thing starts, because you before said, and this is what we commonly are trained in, because our society is so focused on the brain, the head brain, we do everything with our head. But actually, if you look at it scientifically, if you look at it how a person who is not yet trained in this whole process of doing everything with the brain, for example, kids, how would that be naturally fluent, or how would it flow naturally? And the interesting thing is, it starts at the heart. It does not start at the head. It starts at the heart. You feel something. You feel feelings, passion, emotion, whatever it is. Then it goes to the brain, but very careful, not yet thinking about it, doing strategy, doing a plan, doing a to-do list, whatever. The second step would be creativity. You have an emotion and you add creativity. And then from there, it goes naturally to the gut. And the gut, the stomach, gives you the courage. It gives you the drive to do what the heart is telling you, because courage is courage. It's listening to your heart. It's cœur and âge, the age, the time of the heart. So the gut, the third part, gives you the power to really listen to your heart and gives you the drive to do what your heart is telling you. And then, and only then, the fourth part, the last part of this whole cycle is going to the brain, using your brain cells, think about it, do a strategy, a to-do list, whatever. But it's only the fourth part. It's 25% of the whole thing. And what we do in our society is we try to push 100% or 150% into this brain, and that doesn't work. And embodiment trains us again in not being so stupid to try and do 100% with our brain, but actually gives us the ability back to use our other two brains and to do the cycle how it is, like how it should be, and then it's a flow. Then it's not like a push, then it's a flow.
It's so interesting. I also watched a really nice movie. I think I forgot the name. It was also about the heart. I can look it up and put it in the show notes, but it was so interesting because they were also saying that the heart is the first thing that knows before everything else. The heart sometimes knows before things happen.
Yeah.
So it's actually also our intuition in the heart. And what was the second step? It goes in the brain.
But it
adds creativity, you said, right?
It should trigger creativity, yes. If it's a natural cycle, it would be emotions from the heart. Triggering creativity to think different options, different possibilities, whatever. And then it goes to the gut to give you the power, the strength to go forward. And then again it goes to the brain, and then you would actually start the thinking process.
It's so interesting because I think also a lot of people have, when we have gut problems, it's kind of blocked in our power. Also with women, the power is blocked in our...
in the uterus, in the gut, and all those places.
Yeah.
And I think this would be a good point now to explain why embodiment is so important and what embodiment does, or what it blocks and deblocks.
Yes, please.
So embodiment connects the three brains. This is one of the things, and for me this is the best explanations. There's a lot of explanations, but for me this one makes a lot of sense. So you start to act as a whole human being with all your potential again. And you can use this for everything. It doesn't matter where or in which age or whatever. I think we should train this to kids, like first thing, so they never forget because they have it. Embodiment, you can use it in a daily basis just to keep flowing, to keep going, to connect the three brains all the time. This is one part of embodiment. And another very important part of embodiment is it is actually a tool to de-block and loosen and let go what was blocked before in our life, to relieve stress, to relieve trauma, to relieve anxiety, all of those things. And I think there's another thing that I have to explain a little bit. When we talk about trauma, the word trauma, we hear it often. And everyone, I think, has a little bit another picture of what trauma is. I will again give you my explanation, what I learned, and everyone here is invited to think for yourself. Just be open, listen to what I say, but don't take it 100% to add your knowledge to it and take out what you need for yourself. I can only tell you what I think trauma is and what I learned in psychology and in my trainings that trauma is. Whenever we have, as human beings, whenever we have any kind of situations where our emotions are involved, can be tiny situations, it can be positive situations or negative situations, whatever. We are happy or we are sad or we're stressed. Somebody says something to us, for example, during the day, and we're like, why did she say that to me? Like, what is going on? as soon as something like that happens, there is energy in our body, more energy than normally, right? It is like there is this ball of energy forming in our body, and sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's bigger. And there's a very funny thing with human beings. If it's a positive ball of emotions, we normally like it. We like it, we play with it, we enjoy it, we talk about it, we jump around, we smile, we share it with other people, and automatically this energy gets used in our body. This is what we do because it feels good, right? It makes us feel good, it makes other people feel good, so we love it. But when something negative happens, and it can really be a small thing, like a discussion in the office, or someone is rude to you on the street, or small things. Somebody doesn't look at you when you talk to them, whatever it is. You also have this energy within you. But then it's not so easy to let go. And the energy is there. I think we're all grown up here who listen to the podcast. I will give you good an interesting example, but it's the example that my embodiment teacher used, and I think it's quite appropriate. You can think about it the same way than if you're making out with someone, kissing someone you really love, and you're getting closer and closer and closer to the orgasm. You really feel all this energy within you, very, very crazy. And trauma happens if right before the moment you have your orgasm, the other person jumps off the bed, goes out, stops, and you're there like, oh, what's going on? Fuck. But you're not allowed to touch yourself, right? So you're there, all this energy is there, you're like, oh my God. But your body can't do anything. And this energy is there, and it's big energy. And sometimes it's a little bit smaller, sometimes it's a little bit bigger, but it's there. And your body has to do something with this energy. This is the rule in physics. You cannot destroy energy. It does not just go away. It can only transform into other things. We can use it. We can make energy out of the wind. We can make energy out of the water, but it's always there. So it's in our body too. And in that moment, when we feel that this ball of energy is there and we cannot release it, because the orgasm doesn't happen, or because we're angry and in that moment we cannot react, we're not allowed to say something, or we learned that we shouldn't say something, we shouldn't move, we shouldn't get up and just smash the door and go out. The energy is there and it stays in our body. And science says more or less 48 hours it can stay there. Very uncomfortable if it stays there for 48 hours, but that's more or less the longest it can stay there. Mostly even before that, your body will start to transform this energy, because it has to, because you have to survive, you have to live, you have to work, you have to get up and pretend that everything is normal, like we all have learned. So your body is very clever, actually. It's helping you, and it's transforming this energy into tension. It puts this energy, it squeezes the energy together, and it actually, you can look at that in pictures from science. It squeezes it and it puts it to the organs, for example. It squeezes the organs. This is what you were talking about. It often, especially with women, it starts in the gut. It starts in the uterus, in those places where tension happens. And we don't even realize it because it's so normal, and it happens all the time, because in our society, we're not allowed to be angry, we're not allowed to be loud, we're not allowed to just move freely. Like, even if you look at school, in primary school, you're not allowed to get up when you need to get up. You have to sit and be quiet. And this is when we start to learn to not release trauma. And trauma for me is the point where this ball of energy, when the body starts to transform it into tension. And this tension in your body is trauma. And every one of us has a lot of trauma. And embodiment helps us to release all of that trauma. And this was for me one of the most amazing things I've learned in the last years, that even if it's crazy trauma, we're talking about war trauma, or people who have been imprisoned, or whatever it is, like crazy things, you have the power to release this trauma with your body. You can do it. Sometimes it needs help from other people. Like, you shouldn't do it on your own if it's really crazy trauma, because your body and your mind won't allow you to go there. But you are able to release it. It will take time, but your body knows how to get rid of the tension. And this is so amazing. And this is embodiment.
Wow, that was such a good description.
I talked so long. I'm sorry.
No. It was such a good description, because it was so. Yeah, I could really see it in front of my eyes, how this energy gets stuck.
Yeah.
So it's actually, the trauma begins with the suppressed emotions, right?
Yeah.
And because we learned we cannot be angry, we cannot be this or that, we suppress it, and then it builds something inside our body. Either it's tension or other diseases.
Well, that's a later step. First, it's just tension, and if there's too much tension, at some point it will get symptomatic, and that means that the body reacts to it or develops certain diseases, and it can be a broad spectrum of different things, and we all know them. Those are typical things we see in the Western world every day.
Yeah. Like mentally and physically.
Yeah. Physically, it often looks like cysts, for example, in women, or knots somewhere, or like tension. If you go to to a massage, that's the first thing. Oh, your body has tension. What is this tension? Let's be serious. And then, of course, it gets more and more serious, and it's also like depression and burnout and all those things, and gut problems. Like, there's so many different ways of how the body manifests. And it's also interesting because it normally shows you where your body is most able to, like, some would say weak, but I don't see it as weakness. I would say where your body is mostly able to communicate with you. This is the first part where you notice it, and it's actually telling you, hey, look at me. Something is off here, and it's telling you, hey, you have the chance to change something here. I'm giving you signals. And what we normally do is taking a pill to not hear the signals instead of talking to our body and being like, hey, thank you, body. Thank you for telling me. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, this is a thing. Because we always think like there's something not normal with us, either in our brain or in our body, and we have to hide it.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the wrong way, right?
That's the first part, because we learned in our society that we have to work like computers or like a robot. And we are not robots, but everyone tries to be a robot and not like pretend to be perfect. That's one part. And the second part, there is a certain part. Well, no, I have to say it differently. Sometimes it's good to not embody. There is a reason why we have the ability to not feel sometimes. This is also survival. Sometimes it's important for us to survive, to not feeling everything that's going on and so on, to disconnect. Because we only have, every day our body has a certain percentage of energy. I always explain it as a battery. Like, we have every day we have a battery, and in the night it hopefully loads up, but not to 100%. This is the first mistake we make. We think we every day have 100%, but often the battery only loads 60% or 50% or 40%, or it loads 100%, but we wake up in the morning, remember all the things that's going on in our life, and it goes down to 30 because all of that already used so much. So we have a certain percentage of energy, and we simply would not survive if our body would release all of the tension that is in the body in the same moment. We would not survive it. Like, we would fall around and be dead because we don't have enough energy to deal with all of that. So it's very good that we do not feel all of that. Also in a situation where there is a real, like, when you are in danger, like really in danger, then it is a very good thing that you're not feeling your emotions, that they are kind of hidden and stuck and whatever they do then. So you can actually survive the situation and also not feel that much pain, for example, if someone does something to you. So it's really good. The question is, what happens if the situation is over? And very often, especially women, but in general, very often we are stuck in this pattern of being frozen. that feeling. And the problem with being frozen, there's like fight, flight or freeze. This is the normal, we all know that. So we can either fight or we can run away. And the good things about running away or fighting in a situation where it's dangerous, and this is also, by the way, if you're having a discussion in the office, it's the same. You can fight, you can discuss, or you can do flight. You can walk away and smash the door and I don't talk to you anymore. Or you can freeze, and freeze is what is the most problematic, and was for a long time we didn't even know about it because it is so hidden. It happens with women mostly because they couldn't defend themselves that well, and babies and kids have to do freeze because they couldn't defend themselves, so they were just really still in former times and hope not to be eaten or not to be seen or not to be detected. And we still do that. And the problem is when we're not moving, so I'm not fighting, I'm not running, I'm just standing there and being still. And this is when the emotions get stuck within me. And if I do that for too long, and we all have learned this, we do this every day, then there is trauma, and we carry this trauma every day with us, and it gets more and more and more. And we think this is our personality at some point. Yeah. Because it's a routine first, and the more we do this routine, the more used we get to it. And at some point, someone describes you as, oh, she's always shy, oh, she's always quiet, and we think this is us. And actually, it's just this trauma, and I think it's me. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And this is what's going on in our society in so many cases, and this is what also, just to close the cycle, what is the whole thing about self-leadership? To find out what is really me, and what parts were caused by trauma, by stress, by things I learned from my parents or other people and so on, to just take a look at all of this package and figuring out between all those things and layers, which is really me. What is my personality and what do I want to bring forward into life? And if I find this out, if I take the time and then I do steps, I do something with it, this is self-leadership.
So interesting. I have to
go back
to a few points. For me, there are two different kinds of trauma for myself.
Yeah.
Like what I thought was trauma earlier in my life was, okay, somebody has an accident and he has a shock and then he has a trauma. That's how I learned about trauma. Yeah. So this is kind of this shock, and in that moment you have to survive. So that's how you describe it. So, but what we also learned what I also learned in the past years, that trauma is what we learned from our parents, or if, for example, somebody didn't give you the attention and you thought you are not right, or somebody in the family was sick so you didn't get the attention, whatever it is. Everyone has a story. Yeah. We all have trauma a lot. Yeah. Also from society, because there are different cultures and things happening. So how do we recognize what our trauma is? Because it is like you said, all we think we are. We grow up in this trauma. We think that we are this person, but that's actually not who we are.
It's a part of us. It can be a part of us. Yeah. The question is, do I want to carry it on with me? I can choose to if I want to, but I don't have to.
But how do we discover what our trauma is?
And there it gets really interesting, and this is mostly the part when I say this to my mentees, they always look at me like, what the fuck? The trick about embodiment is that you do not, I repeat, you do not have to know what your trauma is. You do not have to know anything about your trauma. You don't have to have any memory, you don't have to have any pictures, you don't have to have like any words to describe it. You don't. You simply don't. And this is the biggest mistake we have because of the way therapy and psychology and everything works. And don't get me wrong, I love therapy, I love psychology and everything. My whole family is full of psychologists. But in the case of trauma, the body plays the big part, not the brain. The body is the one that has the tension, is the tension, and releases the tension. It's not the brain. So we do not need the brain to release trauma. Yeah. But, and this is where it gets hard, we never learned how to do that. We never had a single class, a single hour at school where anyone said, switch off your brain, just do what your body wants. Never.
Yeah.
So we have to relearn how that works. But that's the good and the bad thing at the same time, because we do not have to know. There's a lot of different traumas. You mentioned it before. There's like physical trauma, there's psychological trauma, there is like different patterns, and doctors will give it different names than therapists will do, and so on. But we don't have to know. We don't have to like say this is that and this is that and this happens there and blah 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 blah. Sometimes it's a good connection point for us to start if we want that, but we do not need it.
So how do we start then?
The starting point, from what I learned, maybe I have to say a few words about that. I learned with Michaela Boehm. Maybe someone knows her. She wrote, by the way, a really good book. I can really recommend it to everyone. Michaela Boehm, and the book is called The Wild Woman's Way. It's really a good recommendation for any woman, especially. It's about embodiment, a little bit about trauma, and also a lot about women's bodies and relationship and sensuality and all of that. So a really good book. I trained with her, and she has a method called nonlinear movement, and it's a somatic method. And somatic meaning you're working with the body. It's a very subtle, or I don't know what the right word would be. Like, there is different ways to treat trauma. There is a lot of people doing quite radical, I would say, things. They throw people in a crazy experience in the hope that it releases trauma, and this can happen. This is, by the way, also if we work with psychedelics, for example, that also a lot of therapists and so on start to do work with that, which is not bad, but you really have to have people around you who know really well what they're doing. Because if you, for example, do ayahuasca, or I don't know, take LSD, there is a lot of things on the market you can do. If you do something like that, it can open a lot of the trauma at the same part.
Yes.
By a time. And as I said before, the question is, do you have enough energy for that in that moment to process all of that? And if you don't, it's quite possible that you actually re-traumatize your body, that you make it worse with this experience and not better. And this is why somatic experiencing, I think it was a Swedish or Danish, I'm not quite sure, somewhere over there in the north of Europe, a guy who developed the first somatic method, and they worked with war trauma, and they were searching for other methods than talking. What else could they do? And medication to help soldiers after the war. And they developed a work you can do with your own body. And the beautiful thing is, it is your own body, you do your own work, you do very soft movements actually. And because it is your own body, without any substances, for example, it only opens up the amount of trauma that you are able to process at that time. So it takes longer, but it is a very safe method to work for yourself, or to work with family members, also with other people that you love, in a safe environment where you do not re-traumatize anyone, and you listen to your own body and see what is there today. And the method, it's somatic experiencing, it's called. The methods I work with is always, it starts with feeling what is there. It has a lot to do with mindfulness. The first step is always to learn again, to feel what is there in your body at the moment. Like, really, like, take a moment right now and just think or observe for a second, what are you thinking right now? What is going on in your brain? What do you think? And what do you think your body is doing at the moment? And then go a bit deeper. Really travel with your brain to your heart or your gut and feel what your body signals to you. And don't worry if you don't feel anything. It often happens at the beginning. Maybe you feel some pain, maybe you feel nothing, maybe you feel tension, maybe you feel your breath or your heart. It's all okay, just feel what is there. Maybe you're hungry or thirsty or you need to go to the toilet. And then just compare what your brain told you with what you're feeling in your body. And if they're both saying the same things or if they're saying different things. This is kind of the first tiny step of embodiment, to reconnect those two parts. And then doing this often in training and then combining it with whatever you're working on. Is it like in your work or personal life or working on trauma, whatever it is.
But for example, now when somebody discovers an emotion which is, for example, anger or something like that, it's often this doesn't feel so good because we learn to suppress it, and now when it comes up, what do we do with it? Yeah. So what do we do with it?
Well, first, congratulations, because if you feel that you're angry, this is already a big step ahead. I can talk for myself. I'm a very peace-loving, harmony-loving person. I smile a lot and so on. And for me, anger was something I didn't allow myself for so long. It was not there. I was never angry at anyone, also not on myself. It was not there, but obviously it's there somewhere. It was just hidden very deep down. So for me, it was a long way to find my anger again. So if you feel your anger or sadness or happiness, whatever it is, congratulations, you did a big step already. And then the question is what you also said, how do I deal with it? And this is where it gets really interesting, because there is a subtle, like there's a fine line between using your anger, let me put it in, I don't know how to say that in English, Anführungszeichen,
I don't know either.
in marks, a good or a bad way, you know, it's not only good or bad, but how do I deal with emotions that are not commonly seen as good and healthy and well in society? And there's actually a lot of different possibilities, and again, it depends a lot on the person to find a way to deal with it that feels good for the person. What I learned and what for me is very important, and what is also something I train with my coaches, for example, is always to find a way where you do not hurt other people with your emotion, because it's your energy in motion, and it's not fair to put this on other people. Or let's say it has a lot to do with learning to deal with your own energy, and the other part, consciously communicate what you need. And this is mostly the bigger problem than actually the emotion itself. What I see is often there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of expectations. And that's why the communication doesn't work, because we expect things from other people and are ashamed or are afraid. And instead of communicating what we need, I'm angry, I need 10 minutes for myself, please leave me alone. Whatever it is in the situation, we're attacking the other person because we're already expecting that the other person does not allow us to take 10 minutes or thinks that we are stupid if we do so. And there's so much going on in our brain. And what I see in my work, the most important part mostly is to start at the communication, to really learn to be proud to say what is going on in the body, and to go deeper to finding words for what is going on in our body, because often we cannot explain what is going on in our body. And often we say, I'm angry, for example, but actually it's not anger. Actually it's shame or fear or a pressure or overwhelming or whatever it is. There's so many layers, and we give it all the same name. So the important thing is to first learn for ourselves what is it actually, and then to communicate it to other people, and then to find a way for ourselves, and this again is embodiment, to get the energy out. And this can be movement, this can be punching in a cushion, this can be writing, this can be talking as well, but only if I did conscious communication before. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I call a friend or send a friend a message saying, I'm really angry about a situation, I need to talk to someone, are you willing to listen to me?
Yeah.
And that means that I'm asking the person is allowed to say yes or no, if I can use this person for half an hour as a sparring partner. And it's obvious for both that this has nothing to do with the other person. I need to get this energy out. And I would love to speak about it. Or I can run or I can swim. Cold water is always amazing. Cold showers. And really let it out and shake it out and use your body. There are so many ways, and this is very individual. But it's very important to use communication, because otherwise we are stuck and then it gets quickly very dirty.
Yeah, I think we also have to understand that we both watched with this movie, and I really can recommend it to the people, The Wisdom of Trauma, where he said that trauma is not, what did he say? I wrote it down, wait.
It's from Gabor Maté, by the way, the movie.
Trauma is not what happens to you, trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. So, and that's really interesting, because I think that's also what he says, that we are reacting on our past and not on the present. So our reaction is not what other people did. They just show us where the wound is. So yes, we have to deal with it. Okay, and then we have to communicate, because we learned maybe earlier in our life that we don't communicate then and just suppress it. So, okay, we communicate it, but not against the other person, but for ourselves.
Exactly.
Right?
This is also what I said before. Like for me personally, when I learned again to feel anger, it was a lot about communicating and just like really going deep and thinking, what am I really feeling right now? Why am I doing certain things, and finding out, oh wow, there's actually anger right now, but I can't even, like, I wouldn't have realized it because I didn't give it that name. I forbid myself to be angry.
Me too. I have this, it's so interesting. I also discovered a lot about my anger this year.
It's so interesting.
And I remember also a few years ago, I was with a therapist, and she asked me if I'm angry, and I said no. But she saw it, and I couldn't feel it. She asked me, are you angry of your dad? And I said no. But I really didn't feel the anger.
Yeah, you don't.
No, because it's somewhere buried. I don't know.
But that is exactly the thing. Tension. First you have energy. At some point you have the energy of anger, whatever, and you feel it. But it's too much. And this can happen when you're really small. And then you start suppressing it. It gets tension in your body. What I explained before, trauma. And the more tension you have, you can see it as a balloon, and you squeeze the balloon. And the more the balloon is squeezed, the less space there is, the less you feel your own emotions. The more tension there is, the less communication is between the three hearts. There is often a cut in our throat, more or less. This is also maybe very interesting, just as a side mark. The energy in a human body is built in the brain. All of the energy in the human body is built in the brain, in the cortex, and from there it goes down to the whole body, and it distributes to the whole body, to the heart, to the gut, and to our extremes, like to the hands and feet and everywhere. And now, with what we are doing in our society, that we're pushing the brain to learn so much, to think all the time, to being in front of the computer all the time, and so on, this muscle gets so strong. It's like literally like going to the studio like every day for 5 or 10 hours, doing press-ups and sit-ups and I don't know what, and squats. And this muscle gets so huge that it needs all the energy. And remember, the energy is built in the brain. The brain uses it, so it stays in the brain. It doesn't go down to our body. So our body has much less energy than it actually should have. That's the first thing. And the second thing is then whenever something is happening, our brain is so strong because it trained so much that it overrides any other reaction or thing that is going on. And this is also what you said a little bit. If we learned something in our past as a kid or whatever it is, this is saved in our brain. This is data that is stored in our brain. And as soon as something triggers this, when someone says something or reacts in a certain way, and we have seen this before in our life, our brain spits it out and says, oh yeah, that happened before, and then I had to do this, so now you have to do that. And automatically, because this muscle is so strong, I always say it's like a bodyguard. Imagine this big, huge bodyguard, and it just runs and like tackles the person down like in American football, and no one has a chance to get anywhere near the door, you know? He just, every time he sees someone approaching, he runs and tackles the person down without even asking, what are you doing here? And this is what happens if the brain gets so dominant, and it helps our routines that we learned in like before or as kids or whatever to be even stronger, and to be even like, it's really hard to get rid of them if we don't use the rest of our body.
So it's all about reconnecting to our body.
Yeah,
right?
The three brains or whatever you want to say, but it's reconnecting to the body, and this makes a lot of people actually feeling a little bit afraid, but giving the brain less power, doing less thinking, not more thinking. And I'm telling this to myself every day, by the way. It's not like it's so easy or whatever. I'm struggling with it too, but it is what it is. Thinking less and giving the body more space again. And when we do this alone already releases tons of trauma. And then there is obviously stronger trauma, things that have happened in our past where we really have to work on it to change something. It won't just change because. And this is where we can use embodiment in a conscious way, together with therapy or together with coaching or whatever it is. It's just so amazing because you can use it for everything.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it sounds very easy. And I think it can be easy because the thing is why we think so much is also because we want to control the things. And we are not used to surrender to whatever there is in front of us. But that's the problem. At some point we cannot control everything. But when we listen to our intuition and follow our body, we will get into a flow. And then the body will use the brain to, how you explained it so beautifully in the beginning. So we are conditioned to use our brains.
Yes.
But once we really train this body-mind connection, I think it can be such a beautiful thing.
It is. Yeah. I trained, for example, with Dr. Srikumar Rao. He's one of the most well-known or famous MBA professors in the world. He teaches at all those American universities like Harvard or Yale, or I don't know where. And he said it in a very nice way. He said, we're people, and there's a reason why we have a brain, and we should use it, and we should try to do our best every day and control certain things and make plans and make strategies. But we do all of this while knowing that in the end we don't have control over everything. And if we do this right, if we every day do our best and write the to-do list, do the plan, do the best we can, but with this inch off, we know that in the end we have no control, then we live the best life we can possibly live as human beings. And this was so beautiful for me. And this is also what embodiment does for me. I train a lot of it's interesting, it's actually really cool, I love it. I have a lot of therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists and so on in my trainings who want to learn more about embodiment.
Yeah.
And they all tell me the same. They all tell me this is like the missing piece, because we learn so much like theory about everything, and a lot of them work with like different people in different places, and talking doesn't help. In the end, it's something else. And this is what you said before, that's why I just remembered it. It's so easy and it's so hard at the same time. I just did a masterclass with another very famous embodiment teacher, and he said the trick is you have to do embodiment at least 5 to 7 hours a week. And this is the problem. It is so easy, actually. Embodiment can be so many things. We can talk about that for a second, what embodiment can be. But we don't do it. We don't have 5 to 7 hours a week where we do what is in our society considered as nothing, or leisure time, or free time, because we have to do important things. But actually, the important thing would be embodiment, to connect everything together.
That's so true.
And he said, at least 5 to 7 hours embodiment every week. And this is more or less what Michaela was also going for. They said, start with 5 minutes every day. Like, do a minimum, the golden minimum. Get to your mat or whatever it is. Just get to the place where you want to do embodiment. If you sit there, you have already won. Everything you do then is extra.
So what exactly could we do?
Well, there is tons of different things. And obviously it depends a lot on the person and the situation and what we're dealing with. But in general, what I learned, when we go in the direction of somatic experiencing, for example, is everything where you do not control your body. And there it gets hard again, because, for example, breath work is considered as embodiment, like breathing in certain patterns, or yoga is considered as embodiment, and it can be very good in certain situations. But as everyday embodiment and really connecting the 3 brains, it is not the perfect way to start. And why? Because as soon as you do breath work, you control your breath.
True.
Or when you do yoga, you control your posture. And the first and most important, and actually so simple and so hard step, is to not control your breath or your body. The first start is to, it's very simple. Take a yoga mat or a blanket on the floor. What we learned in my way of doing it, it's always good to start on the floor, on all fours, for example. Don't stand up, because as soon as you stand up, the energy goes to the brain and you start thinking, we do not want this. We go down to the floor. I sometimes start in child's pose, or if you know yoga, child's pose, or you start on all fours, and you just be still on the mat. Feel what is there. Feel what is there in your body. I can feel my back a little bit, for example, and now be really careful. I feel my back, it hurts, and I move with the feeling in my back. I do not move to get rid of the feeling in my back. This is what we would usually do. I would do a movement to get rid of the pain in my back. Stretch it out, whatever it is. No! You stay on all fours or in child's pose and move however your body wants to move with the feeling in your back. And from there you go on. Maybe there's a thought coming up and then you move with this thought in your brain. Maybe your head does some weird things, or your arms do some weird things, and then maybe you experience something in your arm and you go with that. This is where embodiment starts. This is so important. This connects your 3 brains. This trains mindfulness. This trains being in the moment. And this is the thing that no one of us is capable of doing. It's easy. to do yoga or breath work or whatever. I mean, I studied dancing. All of those things are also amazing, and they do other things. They also release a lot and so on. But they're so easy. We get a pattern and you just do it and that's it. But to just sitting there, being there with what is here is so fucking hard.
Maybe is it like the other way around? So you start with what you just described, and then, for example, if I have the feeling, okay, there's something coming up, I have the feeling I really want to move now, or I do want to do yoga or breath work, then I can start doing that, but not as okay, I have my morning routine, I have to do yoga and breath work in the morning because it does this and that, and then it gets a must, right?
Yes,
so
first of all,
we
start in the other way. This is very important. And the second part is be very aware. You can do yoga, for example, in an embodied way. But that means that you do not follow a certain routine. You do not have, for example, in your brain, I have no idea, I'm not a yoga teacher, but for example, as soon as you have the feeling, oh, I want to do yoga now, this is good. But then if you say, okay, now I have to do 5 sun greetings, and then I have to do, I don't know, downward facing dog. And after the downward facing dog, there's the upward facing dog, or whatever it is, I don't know. As soon as your brain starts doing that, that's not embodiment anymore. Mm-hmm. It is embodiment when you really get to the point where your brain is not commanding, this is how it's done. Mm-hmm. Or for me, it was jogging, running, where I learned a lot, because I hated running my whole life. I hated it. And I figured this was because I started running with one of my ex-boyfriends, and he was really good. He ran marathon and everything. And he always told me all of this, like, you have to run, I don't know, 1 kilometer in as many minutes and blah, blah, blah. So in my brain, every time I was running, I was checking the clock. I was seeing how far I got. Do I get to the other park? Did I do the distance? And blah, 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 blah. And I pushed myself. And this can be good training if you want to do marathon. Don't say anything, but it's not embodiment. If you do embodiment, you run because your body wants to do this movement, and then it absolutely does not matter how long it is, how fast or how slow you're going, if you're running backwards, if you're moving your arms while you're doing it. And this is then embodiment. And I started when I read Michaela's book, which I mentioned before. She's also explaining an example about running in there. And then I started to run in really funny ways. I went into the woods and I did turns and I swooped my arms around and everyone was looking like me. And I had so much fun. And this is embodiment then.
Okay, so if we, for example, just wake up and do or connect with ourselves and do whatever comes up the whole day, we are embodied.
Yes and no. I don't think it's a good thing to do that the whole day. There is, as I said, we have a certain amount of energy. There's a reason why we do not feel a lot of things. Like, just to give you another example, I did a lot of embodiment the last years. For my training, for example, I had to do every day for 3 months. I had to do embodiment for a certain amount of time. So it was a lot of embodiment. And it was a phenomenon that was described to me before, but I never really believed it. And it happened. I started to feel so tired all the time. And I started to feel pain all the time. Pain from clothing, from wearing jeans. I cannot, and this is not a joke, my boyfriend is always like, he is ashamed to go on the street with me because I cannot close the bottom of any jeans anymore. It hurts like hell to me. Even if I buy jeans 2 sizes bigger, I cannot close them anymore. It's so funny. Because I did so much embodiment and my stomach got so sensitive, which I love, by the way. But I always have to push down all the, like, even yoga pants. I cannot have them on my belly anymore. It's crazy. I hate it. My bra is 2 numbers bigger than it should be because I cannot have it that tight. I cannot wear any closed shoes. And it really goes in that direction. That's the problem. As soon as you start really sensitizing what your body gives you as signals, you go crazy, because our society is not made for that. So it is good to sometimes not be embodied. But it is very good to know when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and to being aware that you're doing it, and to check for yourself where it is important in your life to get embodied, to do the self-leadership and really find out who you really are, and where it's good to not, and to play with it, let's say.
Yeah.
And obviously to release all that is there to be released, which is the other part.
Yeah. Okay. But also, I mean, what is a flow then for you? Because for me, I also learned in the last, you know me also a bit now, I really, okay, now 1 year ago, I came here to the island, and I remember a few days after I arrived, a few weeks, sorry, we met again, and you said, do you realize that your whole pace is much more slowly? And I realized, oh yeah, that's so true. And I think I'm still progressing in this whole slowly and slow living and stuff like that, because I also came from a very fast-paced environment. Yes. And so I think when we have this slow living, or live this slow days, slowly mornings, etc., and follow more what we feel, what we want to do now, this can also lead to another way of living, and also mindfulness.
Yes.
Right?
It is a lot of mindfulness. It brings up challenges at the same time. This is why I totally understand. First of all, it's not easy to really go into embodiment and to really do all this work. And second of all, it will trigger things. It will not feel nice always. And you will have to change certain things or make decisions in your life. Yeah. Let's put it like that. You will face a lot of things and decide for yourself. For example, me, I always knew when I was a kid, I had a lot of energy. I loved jumping around. I was very embodied. I was always outdoors and running and playing with the boys and so on. And I was also a dreamer. Like I was like, I always had so much fantasy. And when I came to school, I remember I was always the slowest in everything. I just took longer to arrive in school, like to settle down. I never could sit still. When school was finished, I took my time to sort out my books. I like to sort my colors, but school is not made for that. The teacher wanted to close the class. I had to run out. I had a mess in my school bag, so I went home, took it all out, and then I did it at home in my pace. And with the time, you unlearn to do all those things. And now what I actually did is I remembered a lot of that again. And obviously, because you built up a life and you took decisions, and a lot of decisions were taken for you in the best, like your parents or whoever took decisions for you, they always do it with the best they can in that moment. And this can be very different decisions, but it's always the best they can do in that moment. And it leads to certain results. And at some point, and this is self-leadership, and for me is also like the part where we grow up in a lot of ancient traditions. There's beautiful rituals for that, even years where this transformation happens, where you have time to really go deep within yourself, find out who you truly are, who you want to be as a grown-up, what is your purpose in life. And then with this self-leadership, you go out as a grown-up man and contribute to society. And we have lost this. This is so sad. Yeah. But anyway, this is what we try to do in coaching, for example, to provide this space. And you come there, you start doing the work, you start doing embodiment, and you find out, for example, for me it was, oh my God, I am such a slow person. I need so much more time for myself, space for myself. I sleep so much longer than everyone else, and this was never allowed. because office starts at a certain time, school starts at a certain time. In the evening, I don't know, if you go to a theater, I worked in theater, so the theater stops at 11 o'clock. So if you work there, you come home at 1, but you have to be there at 9. So there was not enough time to sleep for me. Anna needs a lot of sleep. Anna needs a lot of time. Anna needs a lot of slowness. And there comes my energy and my passion and my happiness and everything. So I had to take a decision for myself. Do I rather stay in the theater, which I love, for example, or do I listen to my body? And for me, in the end, I decided to follow the rhythm of my body. This was my answer. And for everyone, this answer will be a little bit different.
Yeah,
but it's very important.
Led you also to this, listening to your body led you also to what you do now, which fulfills you. Yeah. So I think we can trust our bodies.
We can totally trust our bodies, and it's so beautiful. It's our biggest teacher. And it also taught me to not wear jeans anymore. So see, if you ever will see me in Vienna in winter, it will be funny. I don't know. Will we do that? But yeah,
you can wear snowboard pants or whatever.
It is very funny. It leads to certain problems. I don't want to hide this, and it is for me an invitation to think about how we want to live life in the future.
Yes.
And this is what being a leader for me also means, to not give in and just going back. For example, for me, wearing jeans, but to find new solutions, to think what is what I need, and then maybe I have to do a clothing line at some point, or I have no idea.
But this is it. We are not adjusting to our surrounding. We are listening to ourselves, and like you said, this is self-leadership, because then we are not doing what society asks us to do, but we are doing our own thing. And that's how you can see it in your life, in my life, in our clients' lives, that people, once they start listening to themselves, they find their own path and who they really are.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. And if they do, this is when people contribute mostly the best to society.
Yes.
So it seems in the beginning as a very egoistic thing, but it's definitely not. It's this part of time that every one of us needs to go within, to really find out who we are, to then being able to offer it to the world.
Yeah.
And this is beautiful if you finish the journey. And if you let people finish the journey, and if you let people decide for themselves and not give them cages. And this is so beautiful.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's also difficult because we come from this society, or also sometimes we for example, me, when I worked so much in my earlier life, this was also something where I got my attention from other people. Yeah. So I think once we start really listening, like you said, we open up spaces for, there will be things coming up, and that's why it's sometimes scary to open this space up.
It's horribly scary. It's horribly scary, and it hurts. It really hurts. It's injuries, and you will feel the injuries. This is always what they say when they say the only way is through. This is it. You will feel it again, and that's the truth. So obviously no one says, I love that. I want. Well, maybe some people are, but most of them are not. But that's the thing. If you want to get rid of it, it's the only way. And somatic experiencing and all of the embodiment work I discovered is so beautiful, because it leaves you so much space to do it in your own time, in your own pace, without hurting too much. As I said, a lot of other methods, they trigger you to do too much in one night or whatever it is. And then they're like, now go home and have fun with it. And then you're fucked.
But I can add my story now from the ayahuasca a bit, because we already talked about in the podcast, and there are 2 episodes about it, the one before and the one after, and another one after. So if you haven't listened to it yet, listen to it. But now it's, I think, 6 weeks ago, and I can add something to that, because that's very interesting now, because what you just said about somatic experience is this slow way of one step after another, and it will only come up what you're ready for.
Yeah.
So, which is very beautiful, because what I experienced now, and I really appreciate my experience with ayahuasca. Yeah. It helped me a lot. It was a life-changing thing for me. But you're right. In one day, you have so many realizations. You go through this whole... My body went through this process. There was so much... It was like cracked open.
Yeah.
So I had all these realizations. I went through the pain. I went through the happiness. I had visions of my future. I saw things in my past. I realized that everything is one. I realized my body is nature. I had this constant feeling of feeling my intuition and following my intuition. And this is also very interesting, because in that state, your body always does the right things to bring you to the next moment. Yeah. And you really learn to go through the process, because you cannot escape it. And you really learn to listen to your body, what it needs right now. If it needs water, if you have to stand up or lie down, or whatever it is. So it was an amazing experience for me, and I was in an awe days after, and I discovered my creativity again. And since then I'm painting, and everything is so beautiful. But at some point, I think a week after, I fell in a hole in this. I was like free fall into my darkness again. And then I spoke to the shaman as well, and she said, now it's about integration, and what came up also will go down again. And I had all my realizations, and my thoughts already shifted, but I couldn't control what was happening with me. So all the trauma came up, the darkest of my dark sides came up. I felt the pain like I don't know if ever before. I always knew what was happening, but I couldn't escape it. Like in the ceremony, you can't escape it, because this is life. And then for weeks, I was down that rabbit hole, was working through it, because I knew I can't escape it. Listen to myself. So this is what integration is about. Once you have this experience, you have to integrate it into life. Also, for example, I gave another intensive coaching week with a coach here. If you have an intensive week like this, you have to integrate it in your normal life afterwards again. So that means you go through these processes in your everyday life. Yes. And then you give these things the space to come up. And also, I had also very happy moments, and now I feel like, okay, I had this in my ceremony, and I just realized last week that I'm going this whole process of the ceremony now in my life, but it doesn't take a day, it takes weeks. And now we are at week 6, I think, and now I'm at the point where I feel like I'm already at the end of the ceremony, and I'm rising again. But I had to go through this whole thing in my real life, and that's what I want to say is that it seems to be you have this healing in one day, but no, you have to remember that you also have to do the integration afterwards, and it takes a while. And the shaman also said sometimes some people need a year for the integration.
That's the thing, and this is what we are often not told. And also where we do not take it takes the time for ourselves. So it can come from both sides, but in our society, like, you have the beautiful occasion here that you can mostly control your time. Like, you don't have a timetable from work, for example, where you have to go every day from 8 to 5 to the office. You had a shaman, you had other people around, you can ask, you know the work, you know the tools to do shadow work and all of that. So you're in the position where you can go through a process like that. And it was still crazy, I guess, what you were telling me. It is still not funny, it hurts and it's shit and everything. But if you're not prepared for that, And if you had a great trauma and no one tells you, this is horrible and this is what...
You can have a trauma from that.
That's the thing. That's the re-traumatization. Yes. And this is so... we have to take this really careful. And I think a lot of people are not aware what their work can actually do if they're not careful. So I'm very careful with all of this. I never tried ayahuasca or any of those myself because I always had the feeling for some reason my body... always did a little bit of this somatic work because also with theater I always did a lot of movement and so on, and I always had the feeling my body knows exactly how much it needs in one night or one day and anything and it's beautiful, and it can be really good to have such a deep experience as well. But then I mean, if you look at ayahuasca and shamans, normally you go to Peru or whatever, you go there for weeks in the jungle. You prepare yourself a month with food, like with a diet, with meditation, whatever, ceremonies. Then you do ayahuasca. And then you have another week or 2 or 3 to integrate all of that. And if we do this here one night and the next day we're in the office, we have a problem. And this is why the somatic work for me is so powerful, because we can use it in our everyday lives. And as I said, it can be as a trauma release or a general releasing tool, but it is also a tool I use in coaching to push people forward, to reach their goals, to get good leaders, to whatever it is, what the topics are, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
We also said before that we have this trauma which comes from culture or which is in society. How can we heal that?
This is also such a beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. What I learned mostly from my embodiment teacher training, but also from Dr. Sri Kumar Rao again, from the I did a 3-day seminar with it, and it was about leadership, and it went a lot. It's really interesting. It is one of the highest voted university courses in the world. He normally does this course for MBA students in America, and they can vote. I don't know, there's kind of voting systems, and this is one of the highest voted courses of all. And it's funny, all the business courses there are for all the people working in Silicon Valley and blah blah blah. He trains all the big guys out there. But actually his philosophy is like, he looked into old wisdom, different traditions from all over the world, and what do they do, what connects them, what do they tell us, and this is how he prepared the whole class. And what he said, and also Michaela in the embodiment teacher training said kind of the same, and I have to add a little bit, epigenetics, science field says the same again. We get a certain percentage of things that we call genes. Scientists say more or less 50% of who we are genes. More or less. Some talk about 30%, some 50%. So somewhere in between there is genes. And the other 50% of who we are, personality, is environment. So this is who brought us up, our parents, our teachers, our friends, and all of that, and what we learned. And it is very interesting because now, since a few years, we can see very well in science that actually all our life we are capable of changing who we are. First of all, we are always able to learn new things. Our brain will never stop learning. This is a lie, well, not a lie, but we didn't know this before. But since when I was in school, they still told us our brain learns till, I can't remember now, but 20 something, I think they told us in school. And now we know in science that our brain is capable of learning all our life. This is the first part. We can always learn. And remember, we do not only have one brain, we have 3 brains. And they all learn and they all change and interchange information and so on. So it's beautiful. We are an organism and the organism is changing all the time. And the other part is genes. And genes, there's also different numbers, but let's say, for example, they save a lot of data. And it is good because this data is saved, so we're humans that are able to live in a certain environment. We get born in a certain place and we get a certain information from our ancestors to know how we should live in this environment. What do we need in that environment? How is our skin working and our body working, and what food do we process well, and so on and so on. But also there, it is very interesting that now epigenetics found out that actually if you do embodiment, if you do self-development, if you do what you said before, like shadow work and so on, you can change your own genes within one life. And this is a little bit a lie and a little bit truth, because what actually happens, you do not change the gene itself. But if you look at it scientifically, it's really cool. You, with the work you're doing and with reprogramming your brains and your memories and your routines that you learned, and when you say, no, I don't want to do this way anymore, I want to do it in a new way, you form like a bubble around your gene. And this bubble holds new information. And the amazing thing is, which I celebrate like to the moon and back, is that you give this bubble to your kids. Like if you then get pregnant, you give this gene with this bubble to your kids. So you actually, if you take your time, work on yourself and then get pregnant, you can change your genes, or you make this bubble around your gene. You give this information to your kid, and then with the time, genes need 5 to 7 generations to really scribe themselves. But with this bubble, the gene has all the or it takes the information from another field, and then the kid starts to integrate automatically what is in that bubble, and then from generation to generation this becomes the gene. And this is so beautiful.
That's so interesting.
And this is how we can really change society.
So it, like always, it starts with us.
It starts with that. If you do the work only for yourself, you don't have to talk to anyone about it. You change this within yourself. And one thing is the genes, and the other thing, which I didn't even mention yet, which is so important, is the neurons that we have and where we learn from. We automatically copy what we see in other people. So if you work on yourself and you don't talk to anyone about it, you just do it for yourself, you will meet people in your life. When you go to a shop, when you are in the office, when you are in the bus, whatever it is, you meet people, and automatically it's mini things, like the reaction in your face or the way your body moves, if your shoulders are open or closed, or the way your arms are. It's tiny things, but those tiny things do a tiny reaction they trigger a tiny reaction in other people all the time. Every time you walk past someone, this happens, but we don't realize it. And imagine if you work on yourself to being more open, more happy, and every single time you meet someone on the street, like every day you pass hundreds of people and you trigger something positive within them.
Oh, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. There's so much to say about this.
And this is the wave. And this is what happens every time. This is what I love the most about my coachings. Mostly at the beginning, people are really worried what will happen with their friends, with family, and so on. And mostly there comes the time where there is a fight or a discussion because it feels uncomfortable. And mostly after that, there's the point when friends, family, whoever, all of a sudden turn around and start asking, what are you doing? You look so happy. Or, I don't know what you're doing, but I was thinking of you so much. Or, I saw you the other day and you looked so fresh. Or, so, I don't know what. It's so unbelievably cool.
And they also start changing. I have this in, also my family is changing. So this is so interesting. I think it's also about connection. It's about connection to ourselves at first, but then I also think that we really need to, was it also in that film where he said, how can we heal that, to bond, to really connect with other people again? And I had this intensive coaching week I was talking about. There was such an interesting thing happening, because the group, they shared their also trauma in the group. And sometimes, no, I bring one example. One woman was talking about her past with her mom, and she told a story, and all of a sudden I looked at another woman and she was crying. And then I asked her, why are you crying? And then she said, you know what, this story, I was listening to this story of the other woman, and all of a sudden I had the moment I was sitting at my mom's bed when she died, holding her hand, and my mom said something at that day, but I never understood what that really meant. And in that moment, the other woman was telling her story, which was a completely other story. She understood what her mom said before dying, and that's why she understood that her mom said something. There was so much love in this, and this moment was for her healing. And that's why I mean, we can share our trauma or our stories to heal other people. Because we are ashamed for our stories, for our pain, for our whatever it is, and we hide it. But it can actually heal other people when we share our pain with others.
It does heal other people, because in the moment when especially shame gets shared, shame does not exist anymore. If you look into shame, there's a really cool TED Talk from Brené Brown, if you want to go deeper into that topic. Shame only exists in the silence. In the moment you talk about it, shame cannot exist. And this alone is so much healing, especially with women. So much healing. And we're not used to those strong bonds anymore, because we're trained all our life to not talk about certain things, to not do this, not do that. And it's so nurturing and so good to really feel again how deep we can be connected to each other and what it really means. And I can often witness that it makes us feel uncomfortable at first, because it's something, such a depth and such a feeling we have never maybe had in our life, or maybe with a few people, but not often. And to regain that is so powerful. Yeah,
but we also have the fear that we are rejected when we share our inner world.
Of course, because this is what we were told all our life, to not do that, right? Because a good woman or a good boy does not do that.
I actually read a really nice quote a while ago, which said, I cannot heal for you, but I can love the part that hurts. And I found that so beautiful, because I think we ourselves judge ourselves even for the pain, but also others for whatever it is. But if we all have this empathy and really look through the eyes of love to the other people, I think that's the most powerful thing.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Oh, Anna, I'm always so impressed how much wisdom you have, and how much also there's so much science which comes from what you're telling. And I remember the last interview we did. It's quite impressive that you always bring these science things into that as well, because it's just the proof of
It's because I'm a nerd and I love to read all of those.
I love it. I love it.
But thank you so much. It's always so nice to talk to you.
Oh,
And I think it was a really good recap of all of that. And maybe just to wrap it up.
Yes, please.
I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that we're not only our brain. Just that alone will help already. And then to just start feeling your body. Give yourself some space in your week to feel your body. And don't see this as leisure time or being lazy. See this as actual real work, because it is, and it is so important. Give yourself this time to just be there with your body, do whatever your body needs to do, And this alone will change so much.
Yeah.
So much. And then later you can like go deeper into it and do trauma healing or do leadership training or whatever it is, and you can go into so many different fields with it and train. But first of all, it's just giving yourself the permission to reconnect with your body and really let this energy sink from your brain deeper. Remember, the energy gets built in your brain, and don't do the mistake, and don't get me wrong, I do this mistake often myself, everyone does it. But find times where the energy can actually sink into your whole body. Your brain does not need to take 100% of the energy. It should not.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, one last question. You really seem to change a lot of lives from other clients and people. What would be maybe 3 things you would give to other people that help to change the life in a positive way?
You have to reframe the question for me.
Yes. Yes. No, just shortly. 3 wisdoms you want to leave to our listeners today.
Okay, good. You not have to prove anything or be anything. Just sitting here, being, breathing, feeling good or shitty, whatever it is enough. Yeah. And really feeling that. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is, you're so much more than you think you are. Just think of the 3 brains and how much wisdom and power lies within there. Oh my fucking God! Let it out! Let it out! You're so much more than you are. And the third thing is, if you want to fully enjoy life, like, and really feel the pleasure often and have a lot of fun in your life, then look into positive psychology. And the trick is to look into how you talk to yourself. And the best trick is, for every negative, again, it's not only positive and negative, but for every negative emotion or thought you have in your brain, bring up 3 to 5 positive ones. Like, if you say to yourself, for example, oh, I feel really shitty today, and you realize that you're saying that to yourself, then say, okay, it's okay, I can feel shitty today, but I love it that the sun is shining at the moment, I have a good cup of coffee in front of me, I love that I actually sit in a quiet room at the moment. I could say now, I love that I sit together and have this conversation with Maike, and just counteract a little bit what your brain is doing naturally. And in that way, this is it's also a study, it's also a scientific field. It's in German, it's called the Positivitätsquotient, if anyone wants to look into that. And this really shows how you can build a balance in your life, and from that balance you can really blossom. So you are enough, and you're so much stronger and wiser than you think, and blossom, really blossom in your life.
Thank you. So powerful.
You're welcome. It's so beautiful to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm also very grateful that we had this conversation. Thank you so much. I really hope that you're inspired by this wonderful conversation and you took something for yourself from this interview. You can find Anna on Instagram at anna.allgäuer, and if you want to know more about this topic, she has a wonderful gift for you today, which is a free masterclass in trauma and embodiment, which you can download. And she will also offer an education in embodiment awareness starting this autumn 2022. All these classes are in German. You find all information in the show notes and of course on her Instagram account, which you can also find in the show notes. if you like this episode, we would be pleased if you give us a feedback on social media or write us a review on Apple Podcast. And if you know people who should listen to this conversation, I would really appreciate if you share this podcast with your people. For now, thank you so much for listening and see you soon.